guys. My name is Jess Koska. I'm the Director of Marketing at Filigree Distribution and the head of Compassion there as well. We are a technology-driven distribution company based in San Francisco, California. And in today's talk, we're going to discuss what goes into creating a campaign, what the form it might take, and the resources you might be able to use to execute it in a more streamlined fashion. So before we get started, we are going to do a little bit of a poll. This is going to be a little interactive portion. To answer those questions that I have for you guys, we are going to utilize the Zoom poll function. So if you haven't used it before, don't worry. It's super simple. It's just going to pop up on your screen. You choose your answers and press submit. So why don't we jump right in? Emily, would you mind throwing up the first poll? So the question for this poll is multiple choice. What are your biggest marketing hurdles? Go ahead and feel free to click all that apply. Once we're done, Emily will go ahead and put the answers up and we can see what everyone has expressed. Awesome, awesome. All right, how are those answers looking, Emily? Wow, lots of budgeting efficiently. Not surprised. And don't worry, because this is something we're definitely going to touch on later in the talk. Also creating impactful content. You know, we have a lot of really good tips and tricks that we'll talk about to help amplify both of those different angles. So our next question here is, do you currently utilize automation in any of your daily processes? So automation tools take many different shapes. In their core, these tools take repetitive tasks and either do them completely for you or at least make them a little bit easier on you. It could be something like a social media scheduler, a password saver, or even maybe just something that notifies you of a deadline. Awesome. And just a quick reminder, if you guys have any questions, you can either keep them in the Zoom chat if they're directed towards Lisa and Emily for any technology stuff. And then at the end, we will have a Q&A. Awesome. Okay, no is the majority here. So I am excited to show you a lot of my time-saving tips, which will help you maybe save some time of your own. All right, and our last question here is, has your 2020 marketing budget changed in any way? Yes, it's increased. No, it stayed the same. Yes, it's decreased slightly. And yes, it's gone up in flames. All right, let's see those answers. No, it stayed the same. That's really encouraging. I'm glad to hear that. A couple of us have, yes, it went up in flames. Not surprised to see, people in that same boat. But let's talk about some ways that we can efficiently use the budget that we do have. And we'll touch on those later in the talk once we get to that budgeting section. So thank you guys so much for sharing. As I mentioned, I work at Filigree Distribution. We focus on providing technology-driven logistics and processing support to 30 brands throughout California. Earlier this year, we saw a good number of our brands downsize in one way or another. After furloughing a marketing team that was just taking shape, one of the sales managers reached out to me and asked for tips to teach their team to be more marketing forward. I was really glad that they did so because I've spent the past 5 years in marketing and then in cannabis, and then the 7 prior to that in the music industry promoting concerts. Needless to say, I've got a heavy tool belt that helps me stay nimble, so when times get extra crazy, I'm able to execute at a high level. So I worked up a quick list of tips, and after that, I couldn't really get the idea that there were a whole bunch of other people out there that, could benefit from the same information. So that's why I wanted to give today's talk, and we're going to go over a few of those tips today, as well as a bunch more. But I want to start at the beginning. So anytime you want to execute anything, you likely come up with a plan, even if you don't realize it. If we want to make a sandwich, we think about the bread, the contents, the spreads, if we even have enough ingredients available. There are thousands of tiny decisions being made to make sure that you can execute successfully and achieve your goal. And each time one of those decisions takes place in the brain, it takes power and time, and those are definitely limited resources. So let's save those resources by thinking of our future self in our present actions. In marketing, we do that through 4 really simple concepts: planning, budgeting, executing, and analyzing. Now, we touched on planning a little bit, but let's dive in. So every great campaign I worked on started with an idea and a document. Writing things down gives us the space to be flexible with the shape of our idea's outcome. It also gives us unified marketing marching orders, which are extremely helpful when you've got a really short timeline. As you can imagine, planning is where you do a lot of the heavy lifting. It's the little duck feet moving furiously under the water. If you do it right, your execution will look like the body of a duck, calm and steady above the water. There are endless tools that you could use to lighten this planning load, but I like to start with a brief. So what is in a brief? Company overview. Who are you? What is your bio? Having it here at the top of any kind of document like this allows people to keep the brand identity in mind and at the forefront. Purpose. Why are you running this campaign? What are you trying to achieve here? This is an area where you don't really want to go too deep, but you'll do that later on in the goals area. So summary. Now that you have down the why and the who, what are you going to do? What's the general idea and the shape of the campaign? It can be something like, I want to launch a series of IGTV videos, 3 videos over the span of a week. We're going to cross-post these on Instagram's feed, as well as the story, and we're also going to DM them to a select group of accounts. So then project goals and KPIs. So this is where you give a high-level overview of what you plan to do and what you want the outcome of this project to be. Setting a clear goal will help everyone understand what they're working towards. How will you measure the success of the campaign? Make sure you include those key performance indicators so that, in the end, when you go into the analyzing phase, you're going to be able to really make sure that you've hit all of your success markers. So target audience, who is this made for? What's their persona? When I think of a target audience, I kind of like to think of a person in my life that this would apply to, and I think of every angle of their life. What do they like to eat? What do they like to wear? What do they like to do? And then I say, okay, how is this going to be most applicable to them and most appealing to them? And then we get into strategy. So that's where you're going to do a lot of heavy lifting as well. You're going to want to be as detailed as possible here. And you really want to dive into every aspect of this campaign. What are the assets that you want to use? What's your copy going to say? What's the tone of the copy? What are you going to use to produce the campaign? How's it everything connected, and where's it going to live? This is also an area where you want to do competitive analysis. So maybe looking at the market and the industry at large and seeing what other people are doing. And if maybe there's some overlap, how are you going to differentiate yourself from those competitors? And if this is on social, maybe you're thinking about hashtags and limitations, which we will go into a little bit later on in the presentation. And then the last 2, deliverables, timeline, and stakeholders. For deliverables, we want to make sure that we list out everything that we need in hand to execute the campaign. I'm going to talk about them in detail, and maybe you think about how many iterations of copy you need, and what images you need, or maybe what images do you want to produce or source. Are you going to use stock photography, or do you have the budget for a photographer? We're going to touch on stock photography a little bit later as well. And lastly, timeline and stakeholders. This is where you map out what's planned above, and you want to make sure that you give yourself a happy path, meaning, when times are great, this is the best option that we are going to have. So give yourself cushion so that when things inevitably hit the fan, you have a little bit more wiggle room. For each task, make sure you include who will be responsible. When will the step be worked on, the start and the finish date, and then when is it completely due? After I finish with the brief, I like to work up a Gantt chart to make sure that my timeline makes sense and it's reasonable. I can throw in a little cushion for that inevitable fire drill. So here you can see kind of like a design program that I've worked on, and you can see all of the dates and how they have dependencies with one another. This is a really great program called Team Gantt, and it's super helpful to, drag and drop and visualize those different angles of your program. So that's a quick overview of a brief and a Gantt chart. These two options are super simple ways to organize your thoughts. Here are for a few more programs that you could utilize to help manage your program or your project. So we have Asana, Trello, Team Gantt, as I mentioned before, Smartsheet, Monday, and Salesforce. And so when you see these resources slides throughout the presentation, I'm going to be putting money signs next to the options that are the more expensive, offerings. Asana, Trello, and Team Gantt, they all have freemium, memberships, so you can utilize them not to their full ability, but in, a very usable way without paying a single dollar. So those are really great places to start. And then if you like those programs, feel free to buy up into those, larger capabilities. Great. So now that we understand all of that different stuff, we're going to talk about, some of these different angles that we can go into. First up, content. So we're going to touch on a bunch of different tips here. The first thing is that we want to make sure we have that target audience and the goal in mind. That's why we wrote the brief, so that we have that specific persona in mind. So make sure that you're speaking to the persona directly when you're creating this campaign. So next up, keep it organized. So we move really quickly throughout our days. And when you create content, it's inevitable that you're going to create quite a bit of it, and it's going to get kind of messy throughout the time that you're utilizing it. So make sure that you establish a filing system on the front end so that you can find what you need in a very quick way. Dropbox and Google Drive are great free options for this. Sometimes we also want to create things that are outside of our personal capabilities or outside of our budget. For instance, if you want to create a brochure, but you don't know how to do graphic design, you might reach out to your community to find a local graphic designer. But if budget is an issue, maybe you utilize a template on Canva to just get you started. Another option is collaborating. There are some really great content producers out there. I know we are all from all over the United States. I know that there are amazing content producers in your local communities. You just have to find them by tapping into the different resources. One of which I'm sure is the Cannabis Marketing Association. And then if all else fails, don't be afraid to use templates or stock photography. Stock photography carries a stigma of sterility with it, but there are some really incredible options out there that have a really low or no price option. And we'll touch on this in a little bit. In the meantime, here are a few resources for content creation. All of these options connect you to some really great stock photography, images, graphics, sounds, and videos. So, let's talk about that stock content. So make sure you're aware of the images licensing. Every image is completely different with, whether it's completely free for you, or maybe you have to purchase up and then, you're only allowed to use it for different areas. we find that there tends to be a line around commercial use. So make sure if you are utilizing a product or a photo for printed good or something that's going to help you sell your products, that you are purchasing into that image and you own the licenses for those images. If you're using a free image, maybe it's on social media or on your website, make sure that you are giving that artist representation, because that artist, paid time and money to produce that image for you, and you just want to make sure that you're giving back. And then also make sure that the image fits your vibe. There's a lot, as I mentioned, of sterile photographs out there that don't necessarily touch on the vibe that you might want to convey with your brand identity. So just make sure that they link up. And I see we have one question in the Q&A. We're going to touch back on this at the end of the talk. Let me just read it real quick. Yeah, we're going to touch back on these at the end of the talk also. So now that we've talked about stock photography, let's talk about some of those resources. So Create Her Stock is an incredible database focusing on melanated women. Jopwell is actually a recruiting platform that has made its in-house stock photography available for open use. So that's also a free option. Tonal, as you can see, it's got some money signs next to it. I believe their images range from $25 to $250, but they are also, focusing on a variety of diverse individuals, and it'll actually allow you to search by ethnicity if you prefer to find one of the a more specific targeted audience. For Unsplashed, if you're unfamiliar with Unsplash, they're a wide-ranging, maybe a little bit more millennial vibe of stock photography. It's definitely focused on some filters and some really beautiful images all around, but they're all free. Again, just giving artists that representation there. Pixel's very similar to Unsplashed, but it's a little bit more like the classic stock photography. And then Stocksy and Shutterstock are those classic stock photography options that are a little bit on the sterile side, but they also give you some nice cannabis images that you can purchase. So last but not least, I want to talk about social media a little bit. So this is where a lot of those limitations that we discussed earlier are going to pop in. I think we all know too well that Instagram is famous for messing with cannabis companies. From the shadow bans to deactivated accounts, it could really happen in an instant. So let's discuss some things that you can do to help protect yourself. Always have more than one Instagram account, maybe even 3. So when I create an Instagram account for an anchor account, I'm going to also create 2 additional accounts that have very similar names so that if one goes down, the other 2 can be populated easily and it won't be confusing to the users or the followers. And I do want to point out that I am speaking about these limitations from a California perspective. So if you do have any questions about the legalities or what you do or you can and cannot do on social media or advertising, I really do suggest that you speak to a lawyer that is well-versed in your local regulations. So in California, at least, everyone interacting with your marketing has to be 21 plus. And this is a little difficult to do, but what we're seeing is that people will put 21 plus only in their bio text in Instagram and then make their accounts private so that, if someone does engage with them, they've said, okay, well, it's 21 plus. So then never talk about selling a product or giving something away for free. This is just a flag, on Instagram. We kind of all ignore it to like some extent, but it is a flag that will possibly lead you to lose your account. So we try to stay away from the word sale, from the word free, from BOGO. You can do those things in practice, but you can't actually talk about them. So just, to be safe, we stay away from those things. And then this one actually came directly from Instagram. Don't list your business address or your phone number on your Instagram account because this this is just the way that they prevent sales on their platform. So just make sure that you can not have that information there. You can, in fact, link to your website where that information lives, but you can't put it on your Instagram account. And then last but not least, save all your photos so that you can rebuild if the worst happens. This is, just having a contingency plan available to you. It requires a little bit of automation, but it's very, very simple. So it's not like very detailed scripting that you would use. I use Zapier, and I connect Instagram to Google Drive through that program. It allows me to not only save the images, but also save all of the content. So I have to do it in 2 steps, but it's very easy to do. And all of that information will then go into Google Drive, and I can populate it into a spreadsheet and play with the different, all of the different information. Okay, so after I understand the who, what, where, when, and why and hows of the project, I'll move on to budgeting. So the type of budgeting that we're talking about here is program budgeting, and it relates only to our campaign and not to the overall expenses of the year. Since we're in cannabis, we're going to come at this from the ground up. This is referred to as zero-based budgeting. Overall, a zero-based budget lays the groundwork for quick pivots. And on a psychological level, it encourages everyone to reassess the value of every expenditure. We need to think about every single thing that we could, that could have a price associated to it, and write that down in a spreadsheet. Your goal here is to predict each and every dollar that could be connected to the campaign. If you have any actuals, meaning things that you know the true costs of, use those as your baseline and round up so there's a little bit of cushion, but not by too much. You want your budget to be as close to the real thing as possible. Wildly over budgeting will become problematic if you do it across every program. And if you're creating a brand ambassador program, maybe this is something that touches on staffing, uniforms, demo kits, swag, printed goods, mileage, food for dispensaries, etc., right? You have tons of different things that could be involved in that. Let's look at a pretty simple budget real quick. So this is a dispensary tour budget that I just kind of like whipped up. I think the idea here would be if you're trying to familiarize yourself with some dispensaries in a different area, maybe you create this budget so that you understand what the costs are going to look like. And in this instance, someone has, said that they're going to go to 20 different stores and they need parking and mileage, and they want to, give them gift bags. So we need to budget for not only the bag itself, but the contents inside of it. And then, of course, in-store purchases, because you want to make sure that you're giving revenue to the store that you're trying to create that relationship with. So before we move on to this, this third step of executing, I just really want to reiterate that if we proactively allow ourselves the time during the budgeting and planning phases, we'll be better suited to react and pivot when things inevitably change. So now you're comfortable with the plan and the costs and you're ready to execute. First things first, if it's been a significant amount of time since you planned, you want to revisit your idea and make sure it's still relevant. Same thing with the budget. Take a look and identify what is a need to have and what's a nice to have. And if you're working from that zero-based budget, your focus is really going to be on the need to haves. So if you've planned properly, the executing part, it should be super easy. Remember, this is our goal, right? And even if it's not, sometimes we have to pivot mid-pivot, and that's okay. Before you dive in, make sure you may want to go back and go back to the planning phase for a brief moment to devise an adjusted plan that will then lead you to the goal line. So here is a list of some of the tools I use to execute. This is another place where automation will come in handy. Later, Hootsuite and Planoly, they're all social media schedulers. They also provide analytics, which we'll touch on in a little bit. Facebook Creator Studio, I use this primarily for IGTV scheduling videos. I don't really use it for anything else because it's a little bit antiquated, and that's why I have Later, which is what we use. MailChimp is wonderful. It's kind of like the champion of email marketing. The cost there is based on your subscribers. So if you are just starting out and you want to start an email marketing campaign, it's really easy to do so for free on MailChimp. Boomerang is a really great Gmail tool. You can use it to delay sending or schedule an email to hit the top of your inbox so that you don't forget to follow up. Gmail templates, this is something that is kind of hidden in Gmail and people don't know that are there. But if you're sending repetitive emails, this is something that's really great to use. Grammarly is a good tool, even for the best writers. It helps keep you in check with all the different grammar rules. And then Type It For Me is another automation tool. This is a great resource if part of your plan is, again, to email a bunch of people similar information. So I use it when I advance events primarily, so that I have, every piece of information that I could ever want to share with people all in one. I also use it to share our bio so that I don't have to type that out every time or copy and paste it. So it allows you to save text and then it's recalled by a simple typed command. And that's kind of odd to think about. So I'm just going to show you real quick what it looks like. So you can see here I'm typing in long and it has produced our long bio for filigree. You can also see that since I'm doing this in Grammarly, it kind of highlighted some passive voice. So we'll just ignore that happened, but it's lovely that it's calling that out for me. And then I do want to show you where Gmail templates lives just because it is a bit hidden. You want to make sure you go to settings and then advanced once you're in settings. And you can see here, it's the second one down. Once you click enable, you'll be able to populate any kind of template or save any kind of template directly from your email window in Gmail. So speaking of resources, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of our local resources here in Oakland. I saw we did have a couple people from California chime in. For screen printing, we love to use Babylon Burning. They're located in Soma in San Francisco. Great dudes. For flyers, stickers, and brochures, we use PS Print. They actually ship everywhere. So, if that's something that you're looking for, feel free to tap into them. For copywriting, if you're looking for help writing an article or establishing copy, and I did see a couple copywriters come in as well, tap into Keisha or Alexa. They're both really great options and wonderful people. And then collaborations. We touched on this a little bit before, but collaborations are so wonderful because these people that you're going to collaborate with have such an education in producing high-end content. So if you have a brand, maybe it's a CBD brand or a THC-focused brand that is maybe more food-focused, Monica is a really amazing source for photography, and she is just incredible all around. So, that's a great option. And then if you're looking for maybe more lifestyle focused photography, Lizzie is also an incredible option. And she tends to maybe bring in a little bit more feminine flair. So if you have a female based brand, she is a really wonderful option for you to look into. So we've touched on all of those different options: planning, budgeting, executing. And now, last but not least, we're going to talk a little bit about analyzing. So analyzing is kind of like if a tree falls in the woods and you does it make a sound? If you don't track what you've created in your campaign, how will you ever know whether or not it was worth your time, your energy, and your investment? So how do we track our return on investment or ROI through the different ways we can execute? First and foremost, you have to create a standard way that you track. Establishing a constant will make it a hell of a lot easier to properly measure any analytics that come your way. For instance, whenever we do an email campaign, I check the analytics at 1 hour, and then I pull a report at 24 hours. That allows me to see how people are interested right off the bat. And then it also allows me to see how the engagement changes over time. I'll also do this for Instagram TV, so IGTV. And because you can't quite download Instagram analytics and numbers, it's best if you do screenshots and then enter those numbers directly into a spreadsheet. So if you're measuring metrics for something like an event, you'll want to collect as much information as you possibly can so that your calculations are as accurate as possible. This will then allow you to calculate any number of metrics, which you can use to track variances from future campaigns. So another great constant to establish is how regularly you'll go and do a holistic review of all of the analytics that you are tracking and all of the metrics that you are tracking. If you are in an active campaign, you should really be actively tracking. So you want to make sure you're watching before to see what your baseline is, during to see any changes, and then after to see any additional changes beyond that. In terms of tools that I might use for doing any kind of data analytics, first off, your native analytics are a really good place to start. That's something like, your information that comes from MailChimp or, the stuff that we were talking about from IGTV. And then collecting those into something like Excel or Google Sheets helps you be a little bit more pliable. As we touched on a little bit before, Hootsuite later and Planoly also give you social media analytics. I've listed them here in best to worst order for analytics. So Hootsuite tends to be one of the better ones because it's been established for so long, it's been around forever. Later is really awesome, and Planoly is like okay with their metrics. So if you choose an option like Planoly or an option that you're seeing metrics that you maybe want to add some kind of supplement to, Metricool is a really good option. That is free up to a point as well. And then things like Google Analytics and Salesforce, they're a little bit more on the advanced side, they're a little bit more detail oriented. And if you're not using Salesforce for your daily business, then you're not going to purchase it just for the analytics. It's a pretty high priced item, but it does share some really incredible visualizations for data. So we've touched on all of these different angles between, planning, budgeting, executing, and analyzing. And the last things I kind of want to leave you with are make sure that you're planning for your future self. So think ahead, and, in today's climate, we really need to expect the unexpected. So let planning be one of those parts in your daily life where you're allowing yourself to truly be proactive instead of reactive. Use what you got. Just remember that we're budgeting from the bottom up. If you have a low or no budget, it's still okay, but we're going to find different and creative ways to still execute the program without having to tap into too many resources. And if you're lucky enough to have a budget right now, try to keep things local. We need to support the businesses that we love so that they'll be here when all of this madness ends. And then lastly, I hope some of the tools that I presented you today, could help you gather your arsenal of tools. Remember, our goal here is to work smarter, not harder. And that said, if you're using a tool and it's not helping you in your process, and it's in fact elongating your process, just be honest with yourself and move on to a tool that's more comfortable for you. And then lastly, I want to share this quote from one of my favorite Philadelphians. By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. Let's do the best. Let's do our best to set ourselves up for success for our businesses and for our personal lives. So thank you so much. Now we can go into that Q&A portion. Lisa and Emily, I don't know if you're popping back in, but we are ready for Q&As.
Yes, feel free to just take it. Do you want everyone to do it through the chat or through the Q&A feature?
You know, I think either is totally fine.
Oh, thank you so much.
Either is totally fine for me. I do see, oh, thank you, Jeffrey. I do see a question here from Paul Cannelly, or I'm sorry if I just butchered your name. What tools do you suggest for discovering keywords used by competition and sources of traffic to competitor sites? I think, you know, the best thing that I have found besides just doing the search yourself is utilizing one of the analytic tools that I provided. I love, Christina, I'm so glad that we talked about Google templates. It's there for you. It's been in the labs area. So recently they moved it into the advanced settings. So now it's available for everyone to go and find. What's the best place to connect with other brand owners? Which LinkedIn or Facebook groups? I mean, I think the CMA is a really great option. I also love connecting through your different local lobby groups. So here in California, we have the California Cannabis Industry Association. There's also the National Cannabis Industry Association. There's distributor groups, there's manufacturing groups. Just try and reach out to your different community members and see what organizations people are discussing and participating in. So Linda says that she's struggling with consistency. So how do you ensure you have multiple posts per week? Do you set up a monthly calendar, or how do you manage every week to get content out there? I can totally understand that right now. So I'm not gonna lie, we have troubles with that every once in a while because everything is pulled so thin right now, right? My best suggestion is for you to use one of those schedulers that I talked about and create a month of content all at once. Maybe it's 20 posts, maybe it's 30 posts, but create a giant block of content with images, with copy all together. And then that way you can drag and drop all of those different pieces into your calendar. You can schedule them out, they can auto post, and it's, you know, you spend a lot of time, maybe like one day a month, and then it's all done. And if something comes up, like, you know, that you may want to take off your content that's already pre-scheduled, you can just hop back in there and say, oh, okay, this thing is happening in the world. We need to focus on that. Let me put this on pause, and then it'll just go back into your saved content. Are there any freemium research tools similar to New Frontier Data? So all of those companies are trying to, you know, gain revenue off of the data that they collect and analyze. However, I will say that people like, I think there might be another, I forget what it's called, like never mind. Anyway, there are quite a few options out there that allow you to chime into some different webinars that they're talking about. They also have tons and tons of emails talking about the data that they're analyzing that go out. So sign up for those different mailing lists and make sure that you're, you know, engaging with those different companies. Do you think social is the greatest converter for dispensary brands? I think right now it's really difficult to draw attention to your dispensary because there's not a lot of in-store action happening. And so right now that best connector is going to be your social media. One of the things that we did recently that was really well received by retailers was we did an Instagram live video digital demo series with one of our brands. And, you know, retailers were reaching out, can we use this to cross post? Because they want to make sure that the education is getting to their patients and their customers, as well as themselves and their bud tenders. So I do think that that is a great converter. If we do everything you tell us regarding social media, can we avoid getting banned? I can't predict that, unfortunately. I wish I could. Sometimes Instagram just throws people out for nothing. But, you know, I think that you're definitely going to be a little bit more safer than you are if you're using words like free or sale or BOGO, and again, this is specific to your local regulations. So just make sure that you can, maybe have a little bit more flexibility there. In California, it risks our licenses. So we don't try to say any of those things. Do you think there's a market for generic cannabis content? I'm a content creator with loads of cannabis content that is just going to waste on my hard drive. I mean, we've seen cannabis content companies pop up everywhere. I think that if you have loads of content, then that's something that you might want to look into monetizing, because there are definitely people out here who need help. As the previous attendee asked, how do you maintain consistency? So if you have really incredible content, let's get it out there. Even if it's like small amounts that you're asking for, maybe you're asking for donations, you'll still make some kind of money. And I think that's a really great thing to just think about for a business. So Amy says she plans to do a video snippet and wants to post on IG, Facebook, and her website. So what's the best way to create one video and post on all platforms? Also, any simple video editing apps. So some of the apps that we talked about in the content area, they are really great for video editing. I think that this presentation will be available to you guys afterwards, but Clipchamp, Promo, and I think another one was like, well, let's just focus on Clipchamp and Promo. So Clipchamp and Promo are really great. Clipchamp, I think, is giving 30 days free right now with a specific code. And once we hop off, I'll make sure that that gets sent around. But, there's another thing that you could use, which is Promo. That tends to be a little bit of a higher buy-in because they, have collected all of this stock video and stock sound for you to use. So in terms of like where to put it first, I tend to use Instagram as my anchor. So that's like my baseline. And then because I have all these different options of cross posting, I might use Zapier to put it onto Facebook. And then I could do an embed link for my website. But if it's something that you're trying to just get out there and it's like a little bit wider and you don't necessarily want it in the specifications that Instagram has, feel free to produce it outside and then put it onto those different platforms. Okay, so what's the best way to collect emails? What value can we provide up front? Or what can we share on the newsletters aside from product and event news? Yeah, this is like, a very valid question. I always think about emails as a transaction, right? Like you have to give someone something for them to give you something. And so when I would do in-store demos, I would make sure that we had some element of swag there or some element of incredible education, or a non-medicated sample that they could take and to try out, so that we are doing that exchange, because people don't necessarily want to give you their email and if they're not getting something from you. So you could do it that way. You could run a promotion that says enter your email here to win so and so, because we're not doing as many in-store events. So something to that extent, maybe. So how does Salesforce take place on cannabis? So I'm assuming that's, what Salesforce's take on cannabis. I can't speak for Salesforce, but I know of companies that base businesses off of Salesforce. So it's definitely something that people are utilizing and doing. Whether or not they are fully accepting us, I think, from my perspective, they are. So I don't know of any specific statement that they have made one way or the other, though. Do you think influencer campaigns or digital advertising campaigns convert better for online ordering capable dispensaries? I think it definitely amplifies the noise around the attention around your dispensary if you're doing that. They're really hard to track ROI because it's so far from the sale. So unless you're giving your influencers something like a code and you're embedding a cookie into your website that's tracking, sales from a link or sales from a code, then it may be a little bit difficult. But I have seen people do this really successfully. Here in San Francisco, we have getsava.com. They work with My Milligram, Marcia from My Milligram, and she's a wonderful influencer to really highlight some of their low dose edibles or low dose products for different generations. So what type of content do you think is most important? Informative, entertaining, or educational? All three. I don't think that one, goes above the other. I think that anything that you should share is probably going to be all three of those things at different portions, right? It's kind of like a pie chart, and it's like, what portion of this is going to be educational, entertaining, or informative? If you take a look at Phil Green's Instagram live videos right now, you'll find 2 really wacky, entertaining videos and 3 really informative videos. And that's because we were in the beginning of the pandemic just trying to make people, happy and also talk about our products that we carry. So you can do one way or the other. If you are brand specific though, and you have maybe some educational barriers to consuming your products, I would say that education is probably the best highlight there. Okay. All right, here I see one from John saying, thank you so much for that compliment. So he says that he's building out cannabisstores.com as a brand and store finder website that allows businesses to showcase and cross-promote the causes that they support in the community. So if you guys are interested, John, I think that's a great thing to add into the chat window as well, so that people can understand what you're going to do there. And he did say that at no cost, the lists, you can list at no cost, and other than making a small donation to the Oakland Animal Shelter. Yes, stay local. Awesome. I see another question from Paul. Do you consider Instagram more brand building tool, or can it also be a lead gen tool? What about IG stories? So I've used it as all of those things. What I find is that if your goal is to do lead gen, then the people that you're speaking to on social media are likely removed from the decision makers that you're trying to, speak with in terms of, getting those leads. And so if you're utilizing Instagram for lead gen, you're going to have probably a lower percentage of success rate than if you were to maybe do some LinkedIn research, some little diving through the internet and through Google, and then target people directly. And then I see one last question here. Once we came up with a target profile, how can we validate it? How can we know if our message will actually resonate with them? That's a really hard question, because sometimes you look at analytics and you're like, awesome, I nailed it. This is great. It's resonating with everyone. They're responding really positively because I'm seeing a lot more views, and I'm seeing shares, and I'm seeing saves. And sometimes you look at it and it could be like, I'm seeing a lot of views, but I'm not seeing shares and saves. So how do I know that they really like it? You just kind of have to trust the analytics and weigh them. If you're talking about something like, an educational message that maybe you're talking to consumers about, if they kind of like, if you watch them while you're talking about it and they kind of go tone deaf, or they like zone out while you're talking about it, you probably need to revise your message or retarget the audience. And also, you can also, find a person that fits that persona that you're talking about and see if the message fits with them and connects with them. because that's going to be your best bet, is just talking with people that you know, and at least then you feel comfortable having that discussion with someone. Awesome. Well, that brings us to the end of the Q&A. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to put it in there. I see we have a little bit left, and Lisa has popped back in. Hi.
Okay. Can everybody hear me okay? I have the Facebook Live running at the same time, so there was a lot of audio going on. Well, thank you all so much for joining, and thank you, Jess. Jess, do you want to let everyone know how they can get a hold of you if they have any questions or want to follow up?
For sure. You guys can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll put my link back in here. You can also reach out Filigreen Distro or filigreen.com, and sending any of those emails will go directly to me.